Hello everybody, Raven Knight here. As many of you who follow my channel and my streams may know by now, I have been vocal about my opinions on the new Spider-Man 2 game from Insomniac. I've made it clear by this point that I have no intention of getting the game and that I feel the game is a glorious testimony to bad writing and propaganda. Watching other folks play it, listening to the dialogue, and observing the cutscenes and direction turned me off from the story quickly. And for me, gameplay in games like this are secondary to story, since the game itself seems to be a giant story with gameplay intermittent. And for that reason, I just can't pick up a game, no matter how stellar the gameplay may be, if the story and characters are terrible. Hence the reason I dropped Horizon Forbidden West, for example. But I think Spider-Man 2 speaks to a larger issue in modern media and storytelling, which is, I don't think people know how to write heroes anymore. It's sad because I grew up loving superheroes. Heck, I wanted to be a superhero as a kid, and as I became a writer, I began to write my own superheroes. Today I'll be sharing 3 of them with you: Tomaki, Tomas de Leon, and Mantis. I'll be talking about these 3 and their stories and how I constructed them, but more than that, I'll be talking about the qualities that I think make a hero and why I was so careful to introduce these qualities into these 3 heroes. But to start off, I think we need to answer a question. What makes a hero? This is a unique question to answer, and you'd think it's a simple one. A hero is just someone who saves lives, right? And granted, yes, that's certainly part of it, but I think it goes deeper than that. I think about the famous Uncle Ben line, while stereotypical and memed a lot, I think it is the ultimate quote to define a hero.
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
With great power comes great responsibility. We all crave power, and some of us are even lucky enough to get some. But when we get that power, what do we do with it? How do we use it? Do you serve yourself or do you serve others? Do you better your own life or do you share what you have? What does power do to you when you obtain it? Now, some say that power corrupts, and I think that this can be true, but I also think power can define who we are. There are 2 kinds of people who get power: the ones who intend to use it for themselves and the ones who use it for others. Sometimes these 2 things aren't mutually exclusive, but you'll find that the ones who use power for personal benefit only are often the ones who become the villains. Those who use their power for others are often the ones who become the heroes. What I loved about Spider-Man was that he started off as the former. Spider-Man began his journey wanting to use his power to better his own life by winning a wrestling match against Bonesaw to get the prize money. When he was cheated out of that prize money, he became vindictive and neglected to stop a crime and sin in progress. He thought it was right because it satisfied him for the moment. That is, until he realized that the man that he let get away with a crime went on to kill his Uncle Ben. He failed to take responsibility for the power he had because it didn't suit his interests at the time, and the consequences cost him greatly. That's why I feel that Miles Morales, by comparison, losing his father in the first Insomniac game, isn't as meaningful as Peter losing Uncle Ben. The loss of Uncle Ben was a partial consequence of Peter's failing to act and not taking responsibility. It's a mistake that Peter carries with him and is a constant reminder of what happens when you don't take responsibility for the power you have. Miles Morales, meanwhile, lost his father, who was killed in a terrorist attack that had nothing to do with him. His father was at the wrong place and at the wrong time. And while it's tragic, there's no underlying lesson or meaning for Miles to take from it. So I feel that's the first thing that makes a good hero, a motivation to become better than who you were or are. Every hero that I've seen, or at least the vast majority of them, rose above something. They learned from a past error of their own, or took heart a grim lesson about the nature of reality, or their city, or their world. They suffered something that pushed them to become a hero. The loss of his father did not push Miles to becoming a hero, but the loss of Uncle Ben and the guilt that came from his failure to act pushed Peter to become Spider-Man.
With great power comes great responsibility. Remember that, Pete. Remember that.
And it is this principle of responsibility that embodied my first hero, Tomaki. Tomaki is a Saiyan, created out of my intense admiration for Dragon Ball Z's power system and fights. I wanted to create a sort of version of Goku that related somewhat to me. In this story, Tomaki lands on a version of Earth not unlike one in DC or Marvel Comics. In fact, in a spin-off story, Tomaki actually meets the Justice League and battles Superman. Tomaki was found and raised by a human woman named Belle. Belle cared about Tomaki like he was her own son, but the stubborn and aggressive Saiyan child only wanted to prove his strength to her. He cared about Belle but never expressed it to her, always acting distant and prickly, arguing with her constantly and starting fights with ruffians and street punks to prove his own ability. After an argument with Belle, Tomaki feels guilty for how he treated her, but isn't aware of how to best apologize since he never does it. However, things take a turn for the worst when 3 strange warriors attack him in the street. He puts up a fight but is overwhelmed by their technology. When the killing blow is delivered, it is not Tomaki, but instead Belle who takes the hit, as she runs in to defend her son. Tomaki is left horrified as he witnesses her self-sacrifice. With her final moments, she confesses that she loved him like her own son, and she's sorry for always being so clingy and motherly when he clearly didn't want that from her. Tomaki finally breaks down, begging his mother to live, telling her he'll do anything she asks from now on, and he'll love her like a son should. Hearing him say this makes her smile as she finally dies in Tomaki's arms. Tomaki's pain turns to rage as he finally activates his Super Saiyan power and destroys the one who killed Belle. He then flees his home of Shan City to mourn and to figure out what he should do with himself now. 3 years pass and Tomaki returns. He's trained and learned how to better control himself and his power, but he's still bearing the burden of guilt for how he treated Belle. He wants to carry on the love she had for him in this city by protecting it, even giving his life for it if need be. I could go more into the story if you like, but there's no need to right now, though rest assured it's quite an adventure as Tomaki battles mutants, aliens, monsters, and even demons. But Tomaki's guilt and pain that come from losing Belle, as well as the recognition that his obsession with power made him cold to the woman who was trying to help him, leads Tomaki to introspection and to better understand what he can and should do with his powers and his skills. His recognition of the destructive nature of Super Saiyan leads him to hold back in battle so as not to hurt other people around him, and his eventual romantic affection and relationship with Victoria Rhodes leads him to continue to evaluate and reevaluate his goals, his purposes, and his motivations. But always he carries that sense of duty thanks to the sacrifice of his mother and the sorrow he felt at things unsaid and unoffered. Learning responsibility to your powers and who you are, recognizing the pain that comes from failing to meet the standards your powers and skills set for you, and experiencing loss that was born from your own failings or from your own mistakes are all things that I feel make great heroes. We see this in characters like Spider-Man, Iron Man, Green Arrow, Ghost Rider, and others. They can even be things a hero learns after they initially becomes heroes, such as Batman. It's something I always look for in a good hero. And no, the loss doesn't have to be someone you love or a family member, but it has to be something that forces our hero to understand their powers and why they should use it and what they should use it for. If you give a kid superpowers, sure, he may want to start off using it for good, but what stops that kid from using it to prank or bully or even get even? An example of this would be Danny Phantom, a show about a boy with ghost powers. In the beginning of the series, while Danny is learning to control his powers, though he does use them to fight ghosts, he's not above using them to get back at bullies, to cheat, or get his way.
Sometimes I have to use my powers for the greater good.
It's not something I'm shaming, because it's natural, and it's what I would expect from the average high school age kid. But what separates Danny from Peter Parker is that Peter started this way, got a taste of cold consequences that changed his whole outlook on his powers and the responsibility they carried, and we no longer see Peter misuse or abuse his powers for his own ends because he learned about the responsibility to them. Danny just naturally matured over time, which is fine, but it doesn't resonate in the same way with us that Peter went through. Now, the second thing that I seek in heroes is sacrifice. This can take many forms for many characters. For some, it's a secret identity, having to lie and hide your real name and nature and actions from people to protect them. Spider-Man, Batman, Superman, and several other heroes do this quite often, and it's a simple but understandable form of sacrifice, having to hide something about yourself. Sometimes a hero has to give up the things he wants to do what's right. This was a theme in Spider-Man 2, the movie starring Tobey Maguire, where Peter stopped being Spider-Man because it was interfering with the things he wanted in his life, only to realize that being a hero often means sacrificing for the greater good and for the world, going back to that responsibility point from earlier.
I believe there's a hero in all of us that keeps us honest, gives us strength, makes us noble, even though sometimes we have to be steady and give up the thing we want the most.
That may mean you don't always get the girl. That may mean you never get to go home. That may mean long and thankless days of doing nothing but fighting criminals. And all you get in return are headlines about a vigilante causing trouble in the city. Being a superhero can be thankless, depressing, and hard. But it is the hero that endures these sacrifices that is truly above the rest. And this is embodied in my second hero character, Tomás de Leon, also known as the Dragon Knight. Tomás de Leon is a 14th century knight of medieval Europe who is a member of the Order of the Dragon. This is not to be confused with the actual Order of the Dragon that Vlad III was a part of. This order was highly secretive and waged a hidden crusade against sorcery, black magic, and demon worship. To combat magic, the order forged armor and weapons in dragon fire. Fire breathed from ancient fire drakes lost to time itself. The armor and weapons forged from this fire are entirely impervious to magic and ballistic weaponry, and only the highest-ranking members of the order can wear them. In time, a traitor emerged from among the order and gave away their secret fortress to a coven of witches who sought to destroy them. The order was destroyed, and the castle, with all its secrets, trapped in a spell to plunge it into eternal illusion and time, never to be discovered. We cut to the present day, and a young K-pop star named Christina Kim, who is a witch herself, has heard rumor of the coven planning something world-endingly bad, and rather than let this happen, she's going to find a way to stop this. She discovers the hidden location of the Order's fortress and breaks the spell on it. But without realizing it, the last member of the Order has survived, preserved thanks to the spell for the last several centuries. Tomás de Leon, the last of the Dragon Order. Christina explains to Thomas the situation the world finds itself in, the danger and the changes. And Thomas hates all of it. He's miserable, depressed, and filled with grief and guilt that he is the last of his order and lost from his true time and true home. He yearns to die so that he can rejoin his comrades in death and escape this strange backward time he finds himself in. Christina pleads with him not to, but he's nearly inconsolable, teetering on the edge of suicide and complete mental shutdown. However, when Christina takes a huge risk for Thomas's sake, he is forced to step in and help her, which reminds him of his oath to the Order, to defend the innocent from the heathens, the demons, and the heretical. And that oath still holds now, even as it did back then. Though he has to embark on a journey through a time and world totally alien to him and in an era that does not accept his old-fashioned attitude and rustic ways, he realizes he can't go taking the selfish path and ending his own life or just quitting to retire in misery. He can't just hide from his responsibilities. It's an odd form of sacrifice, but Thomas learns to let go of that selfish and slothful choice to simply give up and rather to preserve. Even after his story concludes, when given the option to lay aside his weapons and rest or retire or even just die, he doesn't. He decides there's more he can do, even with the coven destroyed, and is determined to carry on his oath, even if it kills him. The reason is because heroes are forced to make difficult decisions that don't serve their own interests. For example, Bruce Wayne, with his vast amounts of money, could easily move away from Gotham and live somewhere else more peaceful, but he chooses to stay and do good, both as Bruce Wayne and as Batman. Wonder Woman could easily hide on Themyscira and never interact with humanity, and yet she involves herself anyway. And in the same way, Thomas could just die and escape the weight and pain of being out of his own time and the last of his kind. There's even a point in the story where a witch offers to send him back to his own time where he can live amongst his own people and live in bliss. Thomas realizes that this is a tempting offer, but chooses not to follow through with it, as it would be shirking his responsibility, and it would be the wrong choice to serve his own ends rather than do the right thing. And yes, this is another reason I don't like Miles in the Insomniac games. Please understand it's not my goal to bash on Miles, but since so many people do like to make comparisons between Peter and Miles, I do feel it is just here. In the Insomniac games, Miles never truly sacrifices anything meaningful that forces him to give up the things he values. He doesn't have to hide his secret identity from his mother or his girlfriend or his best friends. He doesn't have to choose between his family or his superhero work, and he never has to willingly give up anything that he can save. Miles gets all that he wants from both his spider powers and his normal life, to the point that I can't help but think the boy doesn't quite know what sacrifice means. And no, don't tell me that sparing Mr. Negative was sacrifice. He didn't lose anything by sparing Martin Lee. In fact, in many ways, he gained Peter's further respect for it. In fact, I'd argue that Miles didn't even truly learn anything from that experience, as he clearly tells Lee he won't forgive him, which I felt was a little twisted considering forgiveness is one of the fundamental aspects of Spider-Man, particularly in Spider-Man 3 in the Sammy Ruby series.
I forgive you.
Well, if this is my last chance to say anything to you, I won't forgive you. It's just not in me.
You could argue that makes Miles a different character from Peter, and you'd be right, but it makes him far less noble and less worthy of the position of Spider-Man. In fact, forgiving Mr. Negative would have been a form of sacrifice. Forgiving means that you take the higher road and let go of resentment, pain, and anger, that Miles can overcome something heavy and demanding of him. It meant that he did the hardest thing anyone can do for someone else: forgive them. But Miles didn't have the strength to do that. He sacrificed nothing. He got to maintain and hold on to his resentment, and Lee still is redeemed. He offered nothing and gained everything. That's not sacrifice. But finally, and thirdly, a hero to me is more than skin deep. This is more of a modern story writing problem than anything, but it is something I've seen bleed through into hero stories, and I'll give an example. In the anime My Hero Academia, the hero All Might is considered the world's greatest hero and the symbol of peace. Near the halfway point of the story, All Might fights his final battle with All for One, and it strips him of his powers, leaving him a frail, sickly, and normal man. He lacks his power, his presence, and his strength. And yet no one person thinks less of him. He is still praised, thanked, beloved, and welcomed wherever he goes. People still hold him up as the world's greatest hero, even though he's retired and no longer possessing the strength he has. Why? Because it's not power or superfluous attributes that define a hero. It's not your strength, power, gender, race, sexuality, or nationality. None of these things define a hero. It's what you do, the thing they choose, and the people that they save.
You have a quirk now, yes, but it's your actions that inspire others.
No matter how terrible the situation, All Might smiled as he faced the insurmountable. That didn't have anything to do with his power.
Somewhere down the line, writers forgot that. Every hero now has to check a diversity quota box, or they have to have their powers and stakes raised to new and impossibly high levels, or they think it's just not engaging enough. Take Peter and Miles again. Miles Morales' creators admitted themselves that Miles was created specifically to be a mixed-race version of Spider-Man. No higher reason than that. And more than this, in the Insomniac games, Miles has electrical powers, something Peter doesn't have, yet Miles still has all the same other abilities as Peter. He's just better. And yet, despite this, I meet far more people who adore Peter over Miles. Why? Because Peter's heroic qualities don't come from his race or his powers. It's what he did with them and what he learned from them. Miles cannot replace Peter, and even if they tried to, he can't resonate in our hearts the way Peter has, because Peter Parker, like All Might, embodies a hero in his actions, behavior, and presence. Through the responsibility he learned to place on himself and the sacrifices he chooses to make, Peter is a hero even if he doesn't check the diversity boxes, and even if he doesn't have all the cool powers of Miles or Cindy Moon. And it was this that led me to create the third hero that I want to share, Xiao Lai, or Mantis. I'm aware there's apparently another hero named Mantis in the Marvel canon, but I did not know this at the time that I was creating her, and I was creating a character who I thought could be my own attempt at sort of a bug-themed superhero like Spider-Man. As you no doubt guessed, Xiao Lai is Chinese. Her family moved from China to America to avoid the Chinese one-child policy, and while her brother went on to move back to China to pursue his career, his family remained in America, much to her father's annoyance. Xiao Lai attended university and began an internship at EIS, the Entomological Innovative Sciences Department, a research program with the purpose of studying insects and unlocking their secrets that have allowed them to endure, survive, and remain relatively unchanged for thousands of years, and perhaps find a way to unlock the same potential in humanity. There she met Professor Brian Coulson, a man who was dedicated to creating a performance-enhancing stimulant. She greatly admired Coulson, not because of his intellect, but because of his passion for helping others. Coulson talks often about how he wants to save the world, fix the broken, repair the injured, and bring people together. As someone from a broken family herself, who had for so long felt like she needed saving, following and performing in the shadow of a man who held such lofty ideals was something she could truly get behind, and she dedicated herself to him fully. But this changed when Xiao Lai later learned that Coulson's project was being funded by a shady organization because he himself had lost his grant to continue working on it. When she discovered this, she felt conflicted and tried to flee, but was caught in a terrible accident that threatened her life. To save her life, Coulson administered his only prototype of his stimulant into her, hoping it would save her. And it did. But it also is what granted her qualities of a praying mantis. Hyper-reflexive speed, strength, awareness, the ability to climb walls and jump incredibly far, as well as a taste for meat. At first, Xiao Lai didn't even consider being a hero. In fact, she wanted these traits removed from her because she saw them as annoying. However, when the shady organization discovered Coulson wasted his prototype on her, they kill him as a loose end and try to capture her, hoping her blood would be the key to the formula they were trying to make. Xiao Lai has to fight for her life to avoid being caught. And for a while, she blames Coulson and blames the serum that he gave her. But as she goes along and starts to see the broken world around her and all the pain being caused in it, she starts to learn more about herself and her abilities, and perhaps realizes that there's far more she could do with these powers than she thought possible. And among them was saving lives. After all, even though he was working for shady people, Coulson's goal to save people with this stimulant and to make the world a better place was his driving motivation. Even if he was funded by dangerous people, his ideals had been what drove him, and by extension her, and now those ideals would lead her to not just fight for her life, but for everyone else's. The ideals of righteousness and of good are maintained and carried onward thanks to Coulson. They inspire Xiao Lai. Even though Coulson did not have powers himself, his desire to help people and make the world a better one is something she wanted to instill in herself and carry on. The quality of a hero. But that didn't come from her gender or her race or her sexuality, and she's straight, by the way. It came from a willingness to do what's right, to put others before herself, and to take risks necessary that would mean a better future for others. Now, I'll admit that the Mantis' story is still a work in progress and only in the outlining phase, so there's lots of areas to change and improve on, but this was the starting line. And as you can see from Tomaki's story, Thomas' story, and Mantis' story, you can see elements of all three aspects of a hero brought up in all of them. I'm not saying that all three need to be present in every hero that you write, and I'm not saying that you can't even make a hero who doesn't embody any of these. There are plenty of heroes out there who I don't think have these elements directly, but still come out very well. But I think at the end of the day, the way I see people write heroes nowadays, particularly in what I saw in the Insomniac Spider-Man game, is just depressing. When I think of Peter Parker, I think of these three attributes: responsibility, sacrifice, forgiveness, and of course, being more than skin-deep identity. I hear the phrase diversity is everything, and I love that phrase because I can resort it down to an acronym: DIE. Because when you make everything about diversity, when you make everything just skin-deep, well, then your product dies. Interest dies. Creativity dies. The key to making a hero is to remember these key points: responsibility, sacrifice, motivation, helping people. It's not just skin deep. It's not just representation. It's not just propaganda. It was never meant to be these things. And that's why, in spite of how good the gameplay may be, Insomniac Spider-Man 2 is already getting haters. And no, it's not just because of angry, racist, sexist individuals who can't handle Miles Morales as a character. It's because of people like me who see the writing on the wall and realize that the writing has a lot to be desired. If you guys want to know more about my heroes and about the writing that I do have a second channel called Raven's Writing Room, where you can learn a lot about these characters and more stories that I write over there. The link will be in the description. And I want to make this very clear, guys. I adore superheroes. I adore writing. I adore creativity. That's the reason I make this video in the first place. Not to bash on Spider-Man 2, the game. And if you are playing the game and enjoy it, I'm glad for it. I hope you do enjoy it. I can respect a game that has very good and engaging gameplay, and I'm glad that you like it. My problem is, as someone who values storytelling and heroes, and yes, Peter Parker as a character, I just can't get behind this game, and I hope that this video helped you not only understand why, but understand why I think heroes should be more respected than they are these days. I hope that you guys can see that through my 3 hero examples and through what I've had to say in this video. I thank you for taking the time to watch it, and as always, I will see you in my next video. Take care.